Making headlines for this week of June the 12th. Trade traps. Governments attempt to push secret agreements amidst revelations of corporate power grabs. Cabal confab. Bilderberg annual meeting gets underway in Austria. Same, but different. Upping the ante. Greece plays a strategic card that may expose the IMF as being responsible for euro monetary problems. And going to pot. Supreme Court ruling in Canada strikes down limitations on cannabis.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Geoffrey West.
In general news this week, arguably the biggest story is coming out of Canada. I have to admit, this one caught me most pleasantly by surprise and is giving me a bit of hope that somewhere within the corridors of power of Canada, there are forces at work to help change things for the better in Canada. This week, in yet another blow to the government of Stephen Harper, the Supreme Court of Canada has upheld a ruling allowing the use of cannabis in all forms. An article appearing on June the 11th on the CBC website by Trin Teresa Doe reports that medical marijuana patients will now be able to consume marijuana and not just smoke it, as well as use other extracts and derivatives, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled on June the 11th. What is also pleasantly surprising is that the court's ruling was unanimous. Doe continues, writing that restricting medical access to marijuana to a dried form has now been declared null and void. Sections 4 and 5 of the Controlled Drug and Substances Act, which prohibits possession of non-dried forms of cannabis, will no longer be in effect. The decision upholds earlier rulings by lower courts in British Columbia that said they went against a person's right to consume medical marijuana in the form they choose. This 2015 ruling stems from a case in British Columbia in 2009 when a baker working for the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club was charged by police for having possession of cookies and jars of liquid, including cannabis-infused massage oils and lip balms that were intended as medical marijuana products for its members. Doe noted in the article that the baker, Rv.Smith, was acquitted by a British Columbia judge who gave the federal government a year to change the laws around extracts. A BC appeals court also ruled in Smith's favor, leading the federal government to take the case to Canada's top court. The appeal court had also suspended its declaration for a year to give Parliament time to rewrite the law. The Supreme Court has now deleted that suspension, saying otherwise it would leave patients without lawful medical treatment and the law and law enforcement in limbo. It seems odd that the government would allow marijuana to be smoked by medical patients and not consumed in other ways. If I was to speculate on this, my thoughts would be that the government was hoping to eventually discredit medical marijuana because people would do something dangerous while being high. As many know, the THC compound is activated, producing the hallucinogenic effect when it is heated. In other forms, this effect is not as pronounced, and there is growing information to support the health benefits, including for cancer treatments by using non-heated cannabis products. The ruling appears to strike down government efforts to maintain some degree of criminality tied to marijuana for the purposes of commercial profit within the system of admiralty law. It could also be a very big blow to Big Pharma and Big Medicine, both of whom have profited extensively from illness and the sale of dangerous pharmaceuticals. Now, so far in this article, I have mentioned only medical marijuana, but it seems that the ruling actually goes beyond medical marijuana and opens it up to cannabis in general, and it appears the media is only saying medical marijuana, perhaps to avoid causing a rush towards going to pot, so to speak. CVN spoke with Jason Bowman, who has been a regular contributor to the newscast on issues relating to our Indigenous brothers and sisters in Canada. Recently, he has been working with an organization to promote cannabis awareness in a city in southern Ontario, in a province in central Canada. Bowman offered the following comments regarding the ruling on June the 11th.
Essentially, what the ruling means to us, as you've indicated, Geoffrey, is that cannabis, in all of its forms, is now legal for patients to consume anywhere within Canada. So you noted in the article a few examples of products which are now legally available to patients within Canada, such as baked goods. One of the products, however, which has generated a lot of interest and which is now legal and accessible to those who need it, pursuant to this Supreme Court of Canada ruling, is what's known as the Rick Simpson oil, or RSO. You can get a lot more information on this by going to phoenixtears.ca or Googling the Rick Simpson oil. There are numerous health benefits, and most notably, I can tell you, really what's probably the most fascinating aspect of this whole medical cannabis issue would be the apoptic effects that CB1 and CB2 receptors, once activated, have on cancer cells. What that means is that when you activate CB1 and CB2 receptor cells with cannabinoids, you end up having apoptosis occur if there are cancer cells anywhere in your body. Apoptosis is programmed cell death, so your cancer kills itself when you activate these receptors. The article that you referenced used the term, quote, medical marijuana, and this may cause some confusion with the interpretation of understanding. What this means is that the regime is still not understanding the difference between the made-up term marijuana and cannabis, which is the essentially natural plant which produces the cannabinoids, particularly in the female flowers, that we find so therapeutic. The confusion by calling this plant marijuana, spelt with either a J or an H, depending on whether you're American or British, is misleading because marijuana doesn't appear in any botanical book that I've ever seen. The fact that this ruling yesterday was unanimous, and the fact that it represents yet another loss for this absolutely depraved regime, suggests to me that the judges in this land are absolutely at odds with this increasingly runaway and increasingly fascist regime we see in Ottawa, the outgoing regime, hopefully. As far as potential consequences to what we refer to as big pharma, big medicine, and the big money backers behind all these ridiculous and asinine prohibitions and nonsensical regulations prohibiting sick and dying patients from accessing safe, effective, natural medicine, these patients and victims of the frauds and the poisoning that's been going on by organized medicine and the organized drug dealers who wear white coats is going to come to an end, because at some point these people are going to be held to account for their actions. The sections of the CDSA that were struck down yesterday are sections 4 and 5 as they pertain to medical cannabis. So section 6 deals with importing, section 7 deals with actual growing of cannabis, and the accused, Mr. Smith, wasn't charged with growing, he was charged with possession for the purpose of trafficking. So what was stricken down were the possession and trafficking parts of the medical cannabis prohibition, but not the growing, sadly, which is why we still have more work to do. There's no doubt that people will attempt to downplay the ruling. I've seen it already. I've seen the health minister spinning it into her own web of her own style of deceit and ignorance. There are those who claim that we have to think about the children. What about the children? What about the extra crime? What about public safety? We just step away from this nonsense and look at the facts. State after state with legal recreational cannabis are seeing constantly consistent results. I can't see one example anywhere out of any of the data that I've looked at where we've seen any increase in crime whatsoever in jurisdictions which have gone ahead and allowed people to access cannabis. Geoffrey, the potential economic benefit to individuals, communities, regions, and indeed nationally speaking is phenomenal. There are so many uses for cannabis, from its incredibly safe therapeutic properties found in the female flowers to obviously biofuels, hempcrete, building materials, paper, food, fiber, oil, medicine, you name it. It's the brightest burning lamp oil that people know of, and you can drink it. It's 100% protein source for humans. Hemp and cannabis, which is the same plant, really is going to, in humanity's return to this plant that really helps people really become independent. Because when you cultivate cannabis and you use cannabis in all of its forms, you don't need to be going to white coats for prescriptions. You don't need aspirin. You don't need sleeping pills. You don't need antidepressants, anti-seizure, insulin. We